Hello and welcome to Classics Confidential. Today it's the Classical Association Conference at the University of Reading, and I'm fortunate to be talking with Dr. Amy Smith, the curator of the Ure Museum, which is this wonderful background where we are holding our interview. So Amy, tell us a little bit about the history of the museum.
Well, this museum has been not here, but at the University of Reading at least since about 1922. We aren't entirely sure, but we use that as our foundation date. 11 years after Professor Percy Ure was appointed as the first and at the time only professor of what was then Reading College. The university had acquired a few little bits and pieces, both as a college and as a university. Some artifacts, such as other universities, libraries, museums, and whatever, had acquired, for example, from Lady Flinders Petrie, who dispersed stuff that Petrie had brought back. It's not all in the Petrie Museum in London. There's only 80,000 things there, but lots of stuff all over the rest of the country. And so we have a little bit of that stuff, about 100 objects. Some other Egyptian objects came here from University of Liverpool, or Liverpool Museums actually, when they disbanded their collections. So that's where most of our Egyptian collection comes in, but also a fair amount of Greek artifacts, and some stuff that Percy Ure and his later wife, first student and then co-excavator and wife and all of that, Annie Ure, had collected. Not so much in their excavations in Greece, which were at Whitsona and Boeotia, but rather in their travels through the continent. And people knew that the Ures were interested in stuff. And at first it wasn't archaeological stuff so much as the stuff of ancient history, and their zeal for bringing a first-hand experience of the Greeks to their students. So they had some of these little bits and pieces. Not much, really, just some humble fragments that the boys in Whitsona, would pick up from the fields and just sell on, just like children sell things at a lemonade stand or something like that.
But it's wonderful, isn't it, to actually be physically able to handle pieces from antiquity. It really brings it to life.
Exactly, and from the beginning they were actually, at the same time, quite committed to the idea that people could become enthused by and engaged with antiquity through the stuff, yet committed as great friends of the new Greek Republic and everything, great friends of Greek culture and society, to the extent that they wanted the stuff to be there for the Greeks. And so all the stuff that they excavated at Whitsona is there, and in fact much of it's still on display at the Thebes Museum, with essentially the layout that the Ures preferred, which they did in their own publication, which is keeping things in their grave groups, which at the time, in the teens and 20s, was not done by anyone else except Paolo Orsi in Italy, who had pioneered in this idea. And it was a radical thing, because these are the days when people were still saying, let's put all the lekythoi together, let's put all the euryboloi together. And
there was some thematic.
You get some mind-numbing sort of displays. and I'm sorry to say, when I came here in 2000, we had similarly mind-numbing displays. And we tried to shake it up a little bit in the spirit of the Ure's enthusiasm for history and the people of Greece.
Yes, putting it a bit more into context.
Exactly,
really.
exactly. And a much more, as I've termed it, an anthropological experience of Greek artifacts than you get in most museums, because on the one hand our things are not as big and beautiful as, for example, you might find on display in the British Museum, but charming in their own special way, if you think of them as things that actually had a purpose in people's lives. I should point out the British Museum did give us about 100 of their lesser trifles, as it is written in the books.
So it's a collection really made up of other collections, or pieces of other collections.
And people who largely contributed because they wanted to encourage the use of these objects in an intellectual environment.
You're an archaeologist by training, so having pieces of the material culture of the ancient world must be nice.
Oh yeah, exactly. And this is really the way I have made it work as my heavy administrative responsibility, is that I have embedded it in my research and teaching as much as possible. So I'm generally known as a pottery scholar, especially the painted decoration on the pots. But before that, I dabbled in sculpture too. And I think of myself more as an iconographer. And turning my attention more to the pots was something that was a specific research direction that I went in, because I arrived at this museum and found out that there were, maybe 700 pots that weren't published in CVAs or Corpus of Cypriot Antiquities that needed to be published. And we're in the process still of publishing some of them. Even though there was already a CVA, Corpus Visorum Antiquorum, or the 330 volumes at least out there internationally covering, the Catalogue Raisonné, a complete detailed catalogue of all the Greek pots all over the world. There was already one published by the Ures with the Ure Museum in 1954. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. And it's not so much, some people think, oh, well, that needs to be redone. Well, no, that's not the issue so much as it just, there's not enough coverage of all the rest of the things. And one way that I've been working on embedding that also in teaching is having postgraduate students help me with those publications. And so that's also a reason why sometimes it's a bit slow. But our drawings in this CVA that we've already published and our forthcoming CVA and the Corpus of Cypriot Antiquities were done initially by a woman who was on a internship in the archaeology department here. And when this Corpus of Cypriot Antiquities people said we need more drawings, she wasn't available anymore. But then the archaeology graphics technician, Sarah Lucas, very kindly said that she would supervise a couple of undergraduates who were interested in that sort of work. And they have done some absolutely fabulous professional quality illustrations, but over a long period of time, because they're doing it a long time in their studies. Yeah. And likewise for the writing, my now former PhD student, Marianne Bergeron, and a former MA student, Sadie Pickup, and a former colleague who was a student at Oxford, Alexandradou, are helping me with those other volumes, so that eventually it'll all be catalogued. But I see that very much as part of their gaining skills and learning things as part of their early education and their training.
You're also involved in digital classics. So tell us a bit about your work.
I'm not quite as deeply involved in it as I once was. And again, maybe that's a specific research direction of mine, as well as a rather happy realization that digital classics has become mainstream now. So that, in fact, we had a lovely address, a plenary speech from Charlotte Rocher on this topic yesterday. I don't think she formulated it quite that way, but her point was really everyone has to be doing digital classics now. Everyone has to be and is, and the fact that we're doing this for a digital publication, it's all proof of all of that. But back in the earlier part of my career, it wasn't so, and I took actually a huge risk when my first job out of Yale University, where I got my PhD, was as art and archaeology editor for the Perseus project, which of course everyone now knows, and I suppose everyone almost knew it then. But a lot of my advisors said, "Ooh, that's a big risk. You're never going to get back into classics again," as if I was even leaving classics. You were leaving classics, indeed. And I'm delighted to say that Reading actually saw it as a feather in my cap that they were. And at the time, of course, Gabriel Bodard was a PhD student here, and he had done some pioneering work on getting the Ure Museum database started, insofar as if you kind of put it on a couple of documents up via an Excel spreadsheet or something like that, but got it on the web.
Yeah, it seems like the dark ages.
Exactly. And it was the dark ages, and we got more of the catalogue done, so that 99% of our collection is online and photographs of most objects, and we were happy to just plow through and do that, mostly through the work of volunteers. And in fact, we have a volunteer programmer, Brian Fuchs at Imperial College London, and we just we just take whatever, beg, borrow, or, well, we haven't done any stealing yet, whatever grant money comes, and of course grant money doesn't come for digitizing, so that's where you have to get, people to help out. So I was pioneering, I suppose, insofar as I had zeal to get museum databases online and used to give a lot of talks about that sort of thing, and I don't do it so much anymore because everyone got the message. But now what we're working on here in the Ure Museum is we've had a couple of very successful projects last year called Ure View and this year called Ure Discovery, pun very much intended, whereby we're using student volunteers, our own students, working with local school children to help them be their own curators. And this is through a project called Stories of the World, funded by Arts Council England. And the sort of unique way we've done it is have them write their own stories, their own storyboards, and do whatever artistic products they want in connection with that, but turn those stories into digital animations. And our brilliant animator Steve Simons has helped out with that. That doesn't take us quite into the 3D scanning and viewing phase that we're also experimenting with now. We don't have output yet, but we've got successive groups of volunteers doing 3D scans of our objects.
So lots of exciting projects.
So
really
we're developing that archive. We haven't gotten to the point where we're able to deliver all of it online or in any particular way, but we're holding on to that data for the future. So just as Gabby helped assemble a database of our stuff and then push it out, now we've got a database of 3D scans and we'll push them out eventually. So we just have to keep on changing what the next goal is in this digital world of ours. But I'm happy to agree with Charlotte that it's something that everyone is doing and should be doing, and in that sense we can't do digital classics alone, separate from all these other things.
No, indeed, it's all integral and sort of cohesive in the end. Well, we hope so. Let's talk a bit about your book, which is exploring Aphrodite, the goddess of love.
Well, it's not my book so much, insofar as I was a co-editor of that, and again, Sadie Pickup, who was a former student of mine, was a co-editor on that project. And that really, the museum was very important in the birth of that project, because we have a beautiful statue of Aphrodite at the entrance to the Ure Museum, a Roman statue found originally in Cyrene that is on loan to us from the British Museum. And this came through a very happy coincidence, which is Duffy Williams, who was then the keeper of Greek and Roman antiquities at the British Museum and also on our advisory board, came up with a suggestion. I could barely believe it, but that when the museum redesigned itself in 2005, that we could borrow something from the British Museum, and sure enough, they have plenty of statues in the basement that they were actively trying to get used.
Push them out there.
And I came up with a short list of 5 statues, 2 of which were Aphrodites, and brought back pictures of them and asked staff and students, and everyone voted on this one, hands down. Even though she doesn't have a head, but she's quite beautiful anyway, and I was astounded by the response of my colleagues as she was wheeled down the hallway by the British Museum staff, and this lovely old chap who I think it was the last job he did before he retired, but he had taken care of the statues from the British Museum all his career and had beautifully made this great crate with plastizote foam to match her shape, and he revealed her bit by bit by bit, and
it's almost like an excavation, isn't it?
Well, it was like an excavation, and I was completely astounded at the significance, the relevance, the allure of Aphrodite. And I had, in my own research, done some research on Aphrodite through the concept of personifications, in 5th century Athens at least, some on pottery, some in other forms, but Aphrodite was a very important goddess, and she had a retinue of personifications, virtues, good virtues, feminine virtues, makaria, blessedness, peitho, persuasion, and so forth, that attended her. And I had done some research on this as part of my PhD research and my subsequent book on polis and personification. And the more people talk to me about Aphrodite, the more I realized how many different directions in classics she goes into. And it's a little bit like, well, the wonderful thing about a museum is one object will appeal to different people in different ways. And that was one of those topics that brought together the history, the literature, the philosophy, and all these categories. And so, and Sadie was actually working on Aphrodite as part of her PhD at Oxford at the time, so she and I decided to co-host a conference. And again, the response was amazing. It was going to be a 1.5-day conference, and we rejected a lot of papers, and still had a 2.5-day conference. And subsequently, you know, co-edited a book. Again, we did a little bit of an editing process. Not all the papers were published, and some weeded themselves out, and we weeded some out, and peer review and all of that stuff.
Yeah, but it's a wonderful demonstration, isn't it, of the appeal of Aphrodite, you know, to a big audience, really.
And one thing that was fabulous, actually, about that particular conference is that I had people coming at me, even late in the planning process, begging to be involved after we had the papers, you know, all set and everything. One, for example, was Christine Condolian, curator at the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, who was planning an Aphrodite exhibit, which has now happened and all that. And she wanted to come to meet the Aphrodite community, and also to proselytize a little bit. And I said, fine, Christine, you can introduce it between sessions or whatever, and be a session chair and all that sort of stuff. But then a Cypriot filmmaker who wanted to come and showed his film. Well, I guess no, actually, I'm confusing two of them. One was a filmmaker and artist who showed her film as a free showing, you know, as part of the entertainment. And one was an artist who wanted to do some filming for his next film. And so he, you know, interviewed some of the academics involved in that. But great to have a topic that brought in not just the academic community,
as well as academics, and also, as you say, approaching it from different perspectives. What an exciting project!
But the book is more academic. You know, it's made for an academic, well, for an academic and a student audience. The point of approaches to these topics. Sorry, the book is titled "Companion to," or Brill's companion to Aphrodite. Brill being the publisher. And Brill wanted to have a companion that would introduce approaches to the topic for people who either are involved in the topic but want to learn a little bit more, or don't know anything and want to start from the beginning. So
wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Amy, for talking to us today.
You're welcome.